Mr. Frodo?
You cannot die. I see.
The numbers are too great. By nightfall, we'll be overrun.
I will take the ring to Mordor.
One does not simply walk into Mordor. One does not simply walk into Mordor. One does not simply walk into Mordor.
Stupid fat hobbit.
This video is sponsored by Goblins Hate Christmas, a small indie game that wants to bring a smile to your face this Christmas. Here's some more info.
Christmas is coming, it's true. And Santa needs assistance, old and new. These goblins from a village far away are just who he needs to save the day.
If you're curious about this game, you can learn more and support the project on Kickstarter with the link below. Now, back to the review. This is War of the Ring, and this is Pandemic. And now this is a game that's combining a lot of these two together. So a competitive area control mixed with a more puzzly cooperative game that now instead of saving the globe, you're now saving Middle-earth. Two classics in one, Lord of the Rings is back on the menu. Fate of the Fellowship has us controlling all sorts of heroes around Middle-earth of the timeline of the War of the Ring, preventing havens from falling to the hordes of shadow troops, dodging Nazgul with Frodo as he advances towards Mordor, and the Pandemic board game system of trading cards with one another. In fact, it's usually good to have multiple of the same symbol. Or now, Skies Darken above Middle-earth that is like the Epidemic card from Pandemic. This game is bigger than Pandemic, but not as complicated as War of the Ring, with it running between 1 to 2.5 hours and is playable from 1 to 5 players. We played it with the included solo variant twice, with one of those plays being the free way to play it on Board Game Arena. Like heck, yeah, you can play it right now in your browser for free if you want. But our other 3 plays were 2-player, where in one of those games we pretended we had 4 players and controlled 2 sets of characters each. In total, we've played this 5 times. Oh, and we've also played and reviewed Pandemic, War of the Ring, 7 Wonders, Lord of the Rings Duel, and then there's the War of the Ring card game. So we're gonna be drawing inspiration for all of those to make this review. So let's go see how the most mechanically rich Pandemic system to date is like. How to play. The goal is to destroy the One Ring. That is, Frodo and Sam need to get to Mount Doom and roll a certain check. Then if Frodo hasn't lost all hope, you win the game. But it isn't quite that simple because in every game, you have 4 total objectives to do. So the destruction of the ring must be the last objective you complete. Objectives are varied and will ask you to do a certain thing on a part of the map, like capturing Isengard or having 2 players chat with the elves in Rivendell. You lose the game mostly when hope reaches 0, which means that Frodo just says nope and probably just takes the ring for himself. Anyways, yeah, hope generally goes down from Frodo being exposed to bad guys after moving. And he rolls a black die for each Nazgul in the region or troop in his space. Everyone is controlling 2 characters across Middle-earth. And of course, one player must be having Frodo and Sam as a character. Yes, they are one character. Everyone will also have a hand of cards, which corresponds to a region and have a symbol. You'll discard these to pay for things. On your turn, you can have one character perform 4 actions, then another character perform 1 action. So a great way to use cards is to prepare, where you discard them if they match the region you're in, to get that token to spend later. That way you don't bypass your hand limit. Or if you play Pandemic, you'll know about sharing, where you can share the card by staying in a space with another character, and you give them that card if it matches the region you're both in. Characters can also move a space as an action, which is the usual way to move friendly troops around. You can also move friendly characters off of this. You have one big happy group here. Another action is engaging in battle if you have both enemy and friendly troops in your space. Then roll a die up to the amount of friendly troops. Hits just happen based off of the die face. You get perks after combat by discarding some symbols. If you're in an enemy stronghold, you can even take it as an action by discarding 3 swords. That's great for the realm. Dol Guldur is ours. After one player finishes their turn, the Pandemic system activates, where you draw 2 cards for your hand. Then flip over the shadow cards according to the threat level, which starts at 2. So 2 shadow cards flipped. These will move troops or Nazgul and spawn troops on the board. More on this later. Also, when you draw cards for your hand, sometimes you'll get Skies Darken, which makes the game harder. First, you'll shuffle the shadow discard, then place it on top of the deck. Then you move the threat up one space, which could mean more shadow cards get flipped every turn. And that's the basic loop of the game. Do 4 actions with a character, then do another action with your other character, and that's the end of your action phase. Then you draw 2 cards from the player deck, add them to your hand, and then you flip 2 bad cards. And then do the 4 objectives, lastly making sure that Frodo gets all the way to Mount Doom to destroy the One Ring. Make sure his hope doesn't reach 0, otherwise, all's lost. Pros! Component-wise, man, this game is really freaking good. Starting with the map, it's beautiful. It's great, it's good looking. There's just an incredible amount of attention to detail. On this colorful Middle Earth, you can see a bunch of characters hanging around the corners of regions. The fonts and colors are all on point, and the board even has these nice flourishes on the edges to help frame the game. Every time I look at it, I see a new beautiful detail. Montage time.
The hobbits to Isengard, to Isengard. The hobbits to Isengard, to Isengard. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard, God.
Hanging out on the board are these really nice wooden meeples. 4 types for the good guys and 1 type for the evil troops. They're small to fit the board, but the nice part about that is that they're fairly symmetric. Kind of like cubes that you can have them face down, sideways or upside down, and they all still look fine. And there's an area for the unspawned good guys to hang out so you can keep tabs on the number. Every character also has this chunky wooden piece that you can easily move around. And of course, we gotta talk about those Nazgul flying around. They actually look like they're flying around with the standees, and they're pre-painted black. Really help promote that idea that they're looming around Middle Earth, hunting for the ring. And there's 2 different versions. Plus, when you pick them up, you can feel the prickliness of them a little bit, which fits their evil vibe. Oh, evil, of course the game comes with a free Eye of Sauron with the Tower of Barad-dûr. The fact that they've included this is so cool, and it functions as a dice tower with multiple steps inside to help randomize your dice. It takes about 15 minutes to construct with very straightforward instructions. I mean, again, how cool is it to have a tower included in your game where you win, and you can say, haha, take that Sauron, and topple it. The tower also fits in the box without much disassembly. All is explained in the instructions. And the game comes with enough plastic bags and even a separate section for the Nazgul, so there is zero problems putting this game away. In terms of other component stuff, the symbols are all very clear and easy to see. And the art on all the characters is fantastic. Ooh, they're also all together on the back here. And all the player and shadow cards explain themselves well. Like the player cards will show the region they're referencing, and the shadow cards will show the literal pass on the cards so you don't get confused. And the dice are engraved with very clear colors for combat versus searching. Man, that symbol is so good for feeling the dread of losing hope. The box as well has quotes from the books on it to really sell the immersion. Really amazing job with the production here. Last thing on component pros, the player aids are awesome, they explain things well, and they have the search and combat explained on the back for easy reference. Gameplay pros time. And the first is the hunt for the ring. That is Frodo's journey all the way to Mount Doom to actually destroy the ring. This is really well handled and streamlined. And again, we've played War of the Ring, where this hunt for the ring was good, but not streamlined. So currently, all you have to worry about when moving Frodo and Sam is their destination. Then just count up the Nazgul and troops and roll that many dice. That's it. Then Sam has his role to play of giving you the choice of spending hearts to negate hope loss. Then you have the thematic twist of how Frodo can escape troops by putting on the ring, then losing 1 hope, which allows you to do Hail Marys of moving him into huge enemy armies. But then the eye moves over to you. You've been spotted, so you need to move again fast. Or another way to move the eye off of Frodo's region is to start a combat in any other region. So now you're often using other characters to play this distraction game of taking unfavorable or hopeless battles just to shift the eye there. Also, moving Frodo isn't enough because you're required to have stealth and ring resources saved up to make the final trek into Mount Doom. And you have to have all the other objectives completed first. Thus, you have to be mindful about pacing Frodo's journey with the teams, making the initial turn decision to use all 4 actions on Frodo or just 1 action on him more interesting. Or choosing when to use another character to pick up Frodo as part of their movement, since you're constantly doing this in this game for other Middle-earthians. Plus, the Shadow deck does a good job of making the hunt for the ring never end, as there's a proportion of Shadow cards that move Nazgul slowly closer to Frodo or just straight up on him. So no matter how much you run and hide, there's tension to keep moving Frodo. Oh, and then you can move friendly troops through any character's move in action. So let's talk about how they handled combat. It's extremely streamlined, but still gets the job done of making you feel like you're fighting in Middle-earth. All you have to do to understand fighting is that you roll a number of dice up to how many troops you have in that space, and then you can get rerolls by spending resources. But when you look closer into the dice, they tell more of a story. So 2/6 of the results are very good, 2/6 are bad, but you still kill something, and then 1/6 means that you die if you're not in a haven. Then the final 1/6 is the worst result of Nazgul killing 2 of your troops, if Nazgul are there. This actually conveys to you that free troops are stronger than shadow troops, since there's no results that straight up kills free troops unless they're not in a haven. Oh, so if you're defending a haven, you get a defensive bonus. Then, oh, there's no specific modifier to a battle that happens if Nazgul are there, but you are subject to this horrible roll, so make sure you have your rerolls ready. The Shadow Axe from the Shadow deck flips, and just like Core Pandemic, the Shadow deck is going to get reshuffled into the top of the main deck. So you have to know from the get-go what cards are more prevalent this game. That is, what regions are more likely to spawn troops and how troops are going to move. So now with all this knowledge of the dice rolls in the Shadow deck, you now have a fairly good idea of how many troops are needed to defend havens if Shadow troops move onto them, which lets you be more strategic about doing the mass movement of one character moving a ton of troops with them, and also choosing to move other characters with them. In fact, you can conquer evil strongholds, letting you get a huge morale boost of 2 hope, and blocking that stronghold from ever spawning troops again. Huzzah. It's like curing a disease in Pandemic. Oh, but the stronghold can get taken again from other evil troops, which is possible based off of the redundancy of troop routes. Yep, they thought of those carefully here. Most strongholds can be taken again. And Fate of the Fellowship does a fantastic job of framing this evil, this disgusting evil upon the world with all the hordes of troops. It frames it really well as not a disease. That's right, they feel like actual troops tromping around Middle-earth. One is because you have your own troops. So you can move your own troops into battle to launch offensives, and when you fight, you have to roll a die. So there's tension in killing the enemy troops. And then when how enemies march into you, you also roll dice. So it's like you're being attacked by actual enemies. And orcs don't just multiply anywhere on the board, they usually spawn in their homes of strongholds, and they only move in a route to havens, which you can imagine them as just drumming up the gears of war. They even found a way to incorporate the evilness of Saruman without adding mechanics. He's now just a card that starts in the shadow discard pile, so you're guaranteed to see him from the moment skies darken. The evilness of him comes in as he convinces troops to leave their posts, or you can lose hope, or you can make someone discard cards. And of course, because this game is Pandemic inspired, you have a lot of the Pandemic cooperative isms that you need to do among your team, like communicating the shadow deck so you can make sure you're on the same page about, oh look, there's troop movement coming up, guys. How do we handle that? Or how you need to be in the same location as another character to hand off cards to them, or of course, to move more efficiently across the map, so you need to be talking about that. Or how in this game that you literally have to be standing with another character to complete some objectives. And just like Pandemic, you also have event cards, so thinking about what event cards you should play and when, because a lot of them you can play at any time. You can teleport troops across the map, or you can add Ents to Fanghorn. More on events later though. And just like the normal Pandemic, the difficulty of the game progresses for a more intense ending. Skies Darken is your infection card, so the amount of shadow cards you flip over will slowly increase. But now there's a bottom to the cards, which has to do with hunting the ring. So on your turn, let's say you're able to move the eye away from Frodo. Then at the end of your turn, you start flipping cards. Well, one can move the eye back, the next can move Nazgul back, and then if you have a third now with the threat rate going up, you can roll for a search. Oh man, so the moment the threat hits 3+, the game starts getting really scary. And in this game, compared to Pandemic, you can't perfectly track the deck anymore because the bottoms of shadow cards might not trigger. It definitely makes the game feel more tense as you go on, as there's more chance of Frodo suddenly getting ambushed by flipping over more bottoms of shadow cards, but more on this later. Plus the route of Frodo to destroy the ring gets really hard the closer he is to Mount Doom. Since when he's in Mordor, it gets really expensive to move, you need a lot of stealth, and there's a lot of troops there which increase the search amount a lot. So you often think about putting on the one ring to avoid the troops, but then that's shifting the eye there. So then you have to end the game fast when Frodo is in Mordor. Also, destroying the ring is usually hard, as you do a search based off of Nazgul in the region, and it's not surprising to have Nazgul hanging out in Mordor due to card effects. Then you add a die per hope missing, where hope is pretty much never going to be full at the end of the game. To go back to our Pandemic review from way long ago, we complained that Pandemic doesn't have a good ebb and flow to its gameplay, where it's just diseases being dropped fairly abstractly and then you just suddenly cure them. Fate of the Fellowship just doesn't have that problem because you have troops moving across the board that escalates tension, then you have the Nazgul constantly circling around and moving through shadow cards, which adds a little bit more of a story of what's going on here. And then you can lose havens to troops, or you can conquer strongholds, which are more story moments, like conquering Isengard. Pretty cool. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the asymmetry pros with the 13 characters. And remember, everyone gets to play 2 characters each. Each character feels unique in having 2 or more abilities that definitely correspond to their starting region and relevance in the story. Examples go. Awen lets you muster without spending friendship in Rohan. And then if she's there in a combat where Nazgul are there and you roll a Nazgul symbol, she just kills a Nazgul instead. Wow, that's a cool moment. She is no man. Or how Gandalf can use Shadowfax to move 2 spaces when moving solo. Then his muster gives double the amount of troops. Then he can discard a sword symbol to guarantee any result you want after combat. Or Boromir, who can capture strongholds easier, but he is tempted by power, so he can never give the ring symbol away. Or how this Gondor captain can show his true quality by doing a free attack after moving with a troop. He also requires 1 less special symbol to move across paths. So maybe you could use him to move Frodo into Mordor. Maybe you want to play more of a supportive role in Arwen, who gets to teleport troops from her haven to anywhere else while she prepares. Or Galadriel, who can scry the top 4 cards of the player deck to warn you of skies darkening arriving. My favorite character by far to pilot is Gollum, who is a fantastic guide for Frodo as he lets him roll 3 less search dice. However, if you ever have Frodo and Gollum and a friendly troop ever go into the same space, you lose 1 hope, which totally makes sense because the Master tricks us! No Schmeagol trusted Master! The characters having 2+ abilities, whether it be for a way to get a certain resource to your hand, or help movement, or help Frodo in some way, means that you'll often want to have characters together, especially for the end of the game. This lets you have these nice climactic moments of a bunch of characters crossing into Mordor, especially as when you move, you only pay once per move, not per character. When you combine this into the fact that you have 2 characters, that means that you're almost always going to be in the thick of things and not spending unnecessary actions just to travel to where the cool stuff is happening, like you might have had to do in Pandemic. Then there's some cool combos you can pull off together, like Gandalf Evolved, letting you change all the combat rolls to whatever you want, meaning that he can pair up with Awen to kill Nazgul, or pair up with Aragorn to guarantee hits, which get doubled. Or how Merry and Pippin can go ahead and sing a song if Frodo is with them to increase hope. Huzzah, friendship. What's even more funny is that they can distract the Nazgul, because all hobbits look the same, right?
Over here! This way!
They can move Nazgul over to them, which is one of the few ways to just suddenly move Nazgul on your turn. Okay, last combo, little bro Faramir travels with a friendly troop, doing a free attack that he changes the roll for it by spending a stealth card, and then Gollum can pick up that stealth card from the discard pile. The 13 different characters just lets you have a lot of different approaches of playing the game, and you can definitely experiment with seeing how much each character should help Frodo, or go protect havens, or go do an objective. And speaking of objectives, there's 24 objectives in the box. Some of them ask for certain characters to play with too, and you play with between 4 to 6 objectives, depending on difficulty. Now we'll get back to this, but there is a sheer amount of possibilities for sure. The final pro is that this Middle-earth theme meets the gameplay in a good amount of ways, despite it admittedly being abstracted at times. Like, for example, there are almost as many starting Elvish troops as there are Gondorian troops, but it's odd, but whatever. But yeah, we just can't deny there's a ton of elements here to create all these cool Lord of the Rings moments, and I'm gonna drop a couple examples now. Some are canon, and you're playing more correctly by pursuing this canon, or you can do some dumb what ifs, so let's get into them. Gandalf the Grey can run around the map with Shadowfax until he confronts the Balrog. Then he dies and is off the map. Fools. Then later comes back as Gandalf the White, who is slightly stronger. This is totally canon. Or you can have Aragorn be a guide for Frodo and Sam for a bit, helping against Nazgul searches with his ranger skills. Or you can have a mighty conclusion of having an army do a desperate attack against enemy troops to draw the Eye of Sauron away from Mordor. It could be 3v7, you just need to draw the eye. And I'm gonna end this with a hilarious moment from my solo game, of which I don't think actually is completely sound of a strategy, but you can do it, and it does have some feasibility, so let's get into this funny what if. So I had Merry and Pippin take Frodo and 1 regiment of Elvish troops into Barad-dûr. Wait, where are the hordes of Mordor? Well, due to conflicting orders, the huge hordes of enemies, they retreated. And so I made Barad-dûr into a haven with 1 troop. Now, this didn't win me the game because you see Merry and Pippin needed to be away from Frodo to distract the Nazgul away, but hey, I tried. Maybe you could try something like this. Cons. Let's start with component cons. Remember how we kept saying how beautiful this board is? It's definitely a little bit too small for all the Nazgul you have flying around. So okay, I get it. Not everyone has a big table to play on, so they definitely scaled the entirety of Middle-earth to fit on smaller kitchen tables. Let me tell you about the 9 Nazgul. It's very common for the Nazgul to stack in a certain region, and when you have characters and troops there, you just quickly run out of space. In fact, it's not surprising to have all 9 Nazgul in one region because of how the shadow bottoms are. And when it's Dale or Ithilien, you really don't have space to place them. much less see what's going on underneath. This is where the troops being small sucks because they can get hidden so easily under the wings. So currently you have to put Nazgul on the side of the board and just remember they're in a region. But what they could have done is what they did for War of the Ring army areas, but they don't have that in Fate of the Fellowship. We really wish that the board was bigger, seeing how everything is already pretty small. Man, I hope no one loses these small meeples, especially the Brown Nipper Hero ones. For reference, they're actually smaller than Pandemic Cubes. The second component gripe are the shadow cards, which are a little bit thin for how much you're shuffling them throughout the game. Maybe they could have been a little bit smaller to make the shuffling easier since they're so big. Or if they're gonna be this big, then just make the text bigger on them because there's a lot of wasted space on a lot of the bottoms. Oh, also the rulebook, while it looks good and has amazing diagrams and pictures, is definitely missing some things. Like it doesn't explain what happens to friendly troops when you die, so we had to look that up online. But previously we had our War of the Ring brain thinking, oh, the troops are removed from the game forever. Duh. Nope, that's not true. Friendly troops go back in the pile. Also, event cards like the Ents from Fanghorn Forest need to be clarified where you're getting the troops from. When explaining how you lose the game at the beginning, it is so minimal. And for further information, you need to go to the end of the booklet, which they should have just had in the beginning. Oh, also, this game needs an index and a glossary. No excuse for a game this big not to have those. Now it's time for gameplay cons, and let's talk objectives. So, while they are thematic in giving you a lot of the story beats to play with before you destroy the One Ring, they're also very unthematic in the fact that you have to complete the objectives before destroying the ring. Like, it makes no sense that you could have destroyed the ring, but you have to do another thing before. Like, why do we have to wait for other characters to do their side quests before we can do the one thing that will save the world and just destroy Sauron entirely? So we get that the game doesn't want you to just cheese Frodo to Mount Doom on round 2 and win instantly. So another way to fix this is to just make the destruction of the One Ring harder to do. Like, cost more resources to fulfill, then allow for other objectives to give you resources, so now you can do the main objective. But this should always be viable to do from the get-go. Or maybe just have some of the objectives be strictly optional. This ties into how some of the objectives are extremely checkboxy and they just feel like a chore. For example, for decent design, one mission might be this glorious task to conquer Umbar. Okay, it's very violent and aggressive, but sure, it could be a plausible goal. But then another is Eomer has to go around killing 4 shadow troops in Rohan, or Boromir must die. You can see how this again feels very odd that this must happen before the destruction of the One Ring. Oh, look, Legolas has to first kill 6 armies, okay? Wait, Frodo. By contrast, really good objective design is Shelf's Lair, where you were doing it anyways and having Gollum and Frodo enter her space, so now it's like a boss you must complete while in Mordor with these characters. Or conquering Isengard, which makes sense that you don't want that evil fortress in the middle of Middle-earth, so Uruk-hai don't keep spawning. So the instructions tell you that for more replayability, you can mix and match the objectives at random and just use those, as long as you have the Destroy the One Ring as one of them. And we would highly recommend against this randomization and to just use the pre-grouped objectives that have objectives that sound fun to you. They were picked for a reason. Like, it's much cleaner to have Aragorn make the trek into Gondor, and then you just thematically lead troops from Gondor into Umbar and take it. But what you don't want is 3 checkboxy tasks to do before you're allowed to drop the ring off. Okay, last point about objectives, they're really unbalanced, which again matters if you start randomizing these. For example, Challenge Sauron is pretty darn hard by having all these different types of troops go all the way to North Ithilien and then do another action. Or you could just have Gandalf walk into Moria by himself and you will complete this task no matter what. You're just spending resources to attempt to lose less hope. You get the idea. Just use the predetermined objectives. Just use the predetermined ones. Gameplay con time. So now let's talk about RNG, where this game has some weird handling of randomness at times. This is going to be a big umbrella, and none of these points are that bad, but they do add up, so let's get into them. The first is resources. Now, resources are spent for a lot of things in this game, from movement on the board, conquering strongholds, to completing objectives, to even mustering. Well, sometimes you need a resource to do something, and you just don't draw it. This is okay if you have a character that can guarantee generate them on your team and in position to trade it to you, or this character that can generate resources is controlled by the same player. And since the board has a decent amount of locations that require resources to move, sometimes it's better to just wait in a haven and not do anything. Consider that you usually want to hang out in havens to allow you to prepare next turn. And since every single character must do at least one action in a player's turn, it almost feels like there's a type of action missing. Could there be another action to generate these tokens for your characters? Could there be an action to spend some type of resource to draw cards from the deck? And note that drawing cards isn't always a good thing because it does speed up the flipping over of the dreaded Skies Darken card. Let's go back to the start of the game too, where you have very, very little knowledge of what cards you'll flip from the Shadow deck. since the deck has not been reset from Skies Darken yet. So you could get screwed over by unlucky troop movement on the first turn in Helm's Deep. Cause that happened to us one game, but who knows, it might not happen. You just have very little knowledge of that likelihood with only 7 cards in the discard. And the downside of losing 3 hope is awful. Essentially, you can't really plan around enemy troop movement in the early game before the first Skies Darken flips, just cause there's just so many cards left in the deck and you really don't know what they could be. Compare that to base Pandemic, where you know the same city cannot get flipped again, and so you can definitively make strong moves from the get-go. But wait, you say, there's a bottom part of cards, so you won't always get weird movement, right? And that's true, but it can be just as bad in ganking Frodo with Nazgul. What if you get Skies Darken on the first flip too? Then you instantly lose 2 hope, and it just feels really bad. I know it's thematic for the eye to be on Frodo early, but perhaps the eye should have started in Mordor instead with all the weird possible randomness. There's actually a possibility you could auto lose the game after the first turn. First you flip over Skies Darken, so you lose 2 hope, then you flip 2 of these cards and it asks you to search twice. You roll those dice and you lose 4 more hope, then yeah, you could lose the game. Not saying this will happen often, but the fact that it can happen is a little weird. But yeah, that's basically it for the cons. If you fall into the vast majority of groups that are just looking to play this game once or twice and just really get that core introductory experience. However, since we played the game so many times, there's a couple of more icky things that start coming up as you take the game more seriously and try to do harder difficulties. But of course, we get it, not everyone is trying to be as serious as us, and so feel free to jump ahead to scoring now. No, seriously, you can just jump ahead below. It's like over there, especially if you think we're gonna be too nitpicky on cons. Okay, let's go. So back to RNG, this game is just fundamentally swingy. Doesn't really matter so much if you play on the introductory mode, but starts getting frustrating with the lower cushion in harder difficulties. Like shadow flips can move the eye to Frodo, and then the next card can do a search right away. Oh man, so even when I was in a good situation, I could still get searched. Or say you're really out of position with your troops, and then you luck into a card flip that marches enemy troops forward, then immediately back. Is this like a troll march? This gets more swingy the later the game is with threat moving up, because more shadow cards being flipped is way more randomness. Remember, the shadow cards are way more varied than pandemics, and you can do the top or bottom. Or how the good guys could get massively helped by just drawing the right events early. The events are randomly shuffled within this deck. You don't know when you're gonna get them, unlike Skies Darken, which are carefully split into parts of this deck. And some of these event cards are like so laughably good. Like, let's look at Conflicting Orders, where you can move any amount of troops on one space to any other space. Okay, so I play it and move all the Uruk-hai, doesn't matter how many, from Isengard to Fanghorde Forest. Okay, now Isengard's completely empty. Okay, so then I just move in and then I just conquer Isengard without a fight. Huzzah, that's probably an objective completed. In contrast, you could get Orc Infighting, which just removes 2 troops. Okay, not nearly as good in most cases. Or Gwahur brings news, force troops to move in battle. Okay, it's a free action that triggers fights without a character, but requires you to have a natural army still, and you can take losses. Since the events are all completely free to play, basically you just want the good ones ASAP, and something like Lembas is incredible to give 2 more actions to any character, almost doubling someone's turn, as now you do 4 actions and 3 actions. Since we're talking about the player's deck, the turn in which you flip Skies Darken is extra bad, because not only are you down a card when you thought you would get another, you move the eye to Frodo not off of the shadow deck. So this means the shadow cards could just start hitting him really hard even though you thought you were safe. Doesn't matter, Skies Darken. Or how part of the Nazgul search has the Nazgul straight up disappearing. It's odd to get militarily rewarded if you're, say, fighting in Gondor, and then Frodo is rolling a search there, and oh, they give up, they just fly home. Maybe this phase could have been only move the Nazgul if there's already 3 or more there, or move the Nazgul to an adjacent region, or just have this be blank. So after all these RNG considerations, we would say that the only way to actually expect to win in higher difficulties is to spec your team exactly the way you want, and just hope the right event cards come to your hand, and then hope that Skies Darken doesn't happen early. Okay, so you're basically just crossing your fingers and hoping in harder difficulties. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if people are often surrendering after the first or second turn at hardest difficulties because they look at the board, they saw the first couple flips, and they know it's hopeless. The next umbrella of cons has to do with player count issues. That is, this pandemic system game doesn't do anything to fix the problem of quarterbacking. That is, one person or maybe 2 people are just telling everyone else at the table what to do. I mean, the rulebook even tells you to keep your hands of cards public for everyone to see. So it's really easy for the experienced player to just go like, okay, so you must move Frodo there, and then there, and then there, and then you trade with me, give me your card. You must do exactly what I say. We must save Middle-earth. You're in League of Saruman. You're evil. What are you doing? And as we mentioned in pros, how keeping track of the shadow deck is so important. Well, the people that are keeping track of it, maybe the ones sitting on this side of the table, just have a lot more sway in talking. Also, it doesn't help that you can't do anything when it's not your turn, except maybe play an event card if you draw it. There's just no secret information players have, like hidden battle goals, nor is the game complex enough to have progressing player boards that are so wild you just couldn't simply quarterback someone else, like in Spirit Island. Fate of the Fellowship is still in that pandemic realm of having hands be simple because they're just regions and symbols. And characters are straightforward, although this is alleviated by having 2 characters instead of 1, with their abilities generally being a bit more complex. Okay. So where we stand is that the game is more complex than Pandemic, but still there's really nothing stopping me from, I just tell a newcomer exactly what to do. This goes since now there's no mechanical reason to play this game with more people. In fact, optimal player count for the most usage of the game mechanics and low quarterbacking is probably 2 human beings, both controlling 2 players each. That is, you have a total 8 characters to get all the cool abilities, you have character presence across more regions of the map, and there's more card sharing you can do with each other. Solo is also another solid way to play the game, and you could totally just control 2 players and do fine. Now the game does have a true solo mode, but it does have some wonkiness, as you control 4 characters and Frodo. Every turn you move a marker from left to right to signify what character you use for 4 actions, and then Frodo gets 1 action. This often felt bad because it wasn't uncommon that you just didn't want to do that much with a certain character, but you were forced to do 4 actions with them. So now you felt like you were wasting actions. Normally you would have the choice of choosing not to do that much with 1 of your 2 characters. Scoring! Now it's time for a recommender score on Fate of the Fellowship, where we try to critically evaluate the aforementioned pros and cons of the game, with the caveat of whether or not this is even a good idea in the first place. This is a cooperative journey throughout Middle-earth where you must complete objectives and then destroy the 1 ring before Frodo gives up and or too many strongholds die. And this game has a lot of the pandemic system card play, so it may be Matt Leacock's time to show his true quality. Anyways, this game is going to get a 8 out of 10 recommender. It is great. This will be great for couples, families, and mere mortals who always wanted a War of the Ring, but just couldn't stomach the intensity or huge hassle of that rulebook. So sure, as we said in the cons, there's a whole bunch of reservations if you're serious about winning consistently, or want an incredibly replayable or consistently fair feeling experience. But we understand that's not really what this game is trying to present. It's really just enough for people to enjoy Middle-earth on a grand scale cooperatively, and there's a lot of characters and objectives here to make your first 2 games really stand out. Once on introductory mode, and then second on the medium difficulty. To put it simply, if you love Pandemic first and foremost, and then want Lord of the Rings on top of that, go out and buy this. That's it, you shall be pleased. For an old school comparison, Arwen is like the researcher, and Galadriel is like the contingency planner. If you love War of the Ring, or the concept of War of the Ring, and you want to play it cooperatively in a shorter time frame, then yeah, I don't think you can go too wrong here either. But I can't give it as much of a vote of confidence compared to if you were already a Pandemic fan, because of the quarterbacking in this game and the RNG considerations. And let's do some quick side-by-side comparisons with War of the Ring. That game was incredibly clunky with a bajillion mechanics that aren't explained well, despite being very good in execution. And that board setup is quite similar to Fate of the Fellowship's, it's just more complicated. What Fate of the Fellowship shares with that game is that you still do climactic checks to move Frodo and destroy the ring, and you have leaders launching cool battles, with even Nazgul participating through a certain die result. And now, you don't have to do diplomacy to rally the free people of Middle-earth. That's huge streamlining. So yeah, there is some silly goofiness like the hobbits conquering parts of Mordor or Aragorn becoming a basic demigod and annihilating any enemy sent towards him. But if you look at the art, the tone is pretty well set. So sure, it doesn't have the pure mechanics meeting gameplay perfectly like War of the Ring, but that doesn't mean it's not great for who it's for. Fate of the Fellowship is still a complicated game, and whether you played Pandemic before or not, you should set aside a good amount of time to learn and play this game. It's just that it's nowhere near War of the Ring. I would recommend playing this 1 to 2 players first, at least a couple of rounds, before taking it to a group of 4 to 5, but 4 players should be a hard cap for downtime's sake. Lastly, as you might have picked up during our cons, this game on standard difficulty is pretty hard. And it's likely because Matt Leacock is developing this with the assumption that you have played previous Pandemic systems, since that game is about a decade and a half old. And if you're new to co-ops, you probably wouldn't start with something as big as this box of Fate of the Fellowship. So even if you played lots of Pandemic and Pandemic Legacy Season 1 like we have, there's definitely a challenge here. If you don't want to look through the Shadow discard and just want to continually conquer Shadow strongholds and lead huge armies, play another Lord of the Rings game. If you haven't played much cooperative board gaming but still want to jump into this, don't be afraid to reduce the difficulty of this game by making Skies Darken drop you by 1 hope instead of 2, or making losing a stronghold be only -2 hope. If Will Wheaton's tabletop series was still around, this game would make for a fantastic 2-parter on that. It has a lot of theme to present, you could role play a lot, and it just looks gorgeous. This game just looks phenomenal visually.
I would give Fate of the Fellowship a 7 out of 10. I think it's a good game. I always found Pandemic to be a decently fun puzzle to solve, and Fate of the Fellowship mostly just expands on the ideas of Pandemic in a way that is very pleasing to me. I enjoy moving my characters around and trying to leverage their abilities as best as possible to, I was going to say cure the disease, to put the ring in Mordor. I basically don't have any problems mechanically with Fate of the Fellowship. I do think that it can produce moments that feel bad, so to speak, on early plays of the game, like flipping multiple shadow cards that lead to fortresses falling apart. And if you're a new player, that probably feels unfun. It doesn't help that the odds of those sorts of outlier situations are just that, outliers. It's definitely a game that I enjoyed playing and learning about its system over and over again till I was able to approach something resembling mastery over it, at least on the easy mode. The issues I have with it are the theme is a little incongruous with the mechanics of Pandemic. Like, is there a reason why Gandalf can't help Frodo be more stealthy because the card he's holding is the Mordor card and the party's in the Misty Mountains? It's all a little too abstract. It doesn't quite work for me. But I understand it needs to be that way because that is what this game system does. Whenever a situation like that crops up where I want to help my fellow party member and I can't because of some very gamey artificial barrier, it immediately takes me out of the game. My second problem is there's no reason to play this game with any other humans ever. The most optimal way to play this game, as far as I'm concerned, is by myself, which is fine. I don't hate solo games or really dislike solo games on principle. It's just they're kind of a different entity for me than board gaming as a whole, which is principally a social experience as far as I'm concerned.
My personal score for Fate of the Fellowship is gonna be... I'm not really too sure. I'm really torn between a 6 and a 7 out of 10. This game is simultaneously both very satisfying and also frustrating to play. But I like Lord of the Rings so much, I'm just gonna give it the benefit of the doubt and say 7 out of 10. I have a good time with this game. Yeah, on my second run of this, I was just really annoyed with the game because I just lost through bad RNG again, and some of the objectives are just infuriating snooze fest. So I was ready to solidify my 6 out of 10 with the next couple of games we played, but then in the final game we played, I had fun with the right objectives. So yeah, now let's raise it to a 7 out of 10. So you guys know I love Lord of the Rings, if it wasn't obvious by this review, and man, are those movies just a gold standard of filmmaking. So naturally, all of the characters in this game are very compelling to play. And so the stuff I'm doing feels generally good, like moving Frodo towards Mount Doom is cool, and mustering Gondorian troops. Or leading troops to Umbar with Aragorn felt awesome. It's like writing a whole new story, and perhaps it's a Gondorian power trip. And this presentation is pretty much immaculate, and it's making War of the Ring look like a dusty relic. And the fact that you get to control 2 characters instead of 1, and now there's actual troop movement on the board, yeah, that makes this gameplay way more compelling for me than Pandemic, of which I found insanely dry. I just played it so many times and I find it just very repetitive too. As for Fate of the Fellowship, I've played this 5 times and would totally be down to play again, although I don't think I would personally suggest to play it, at least for another couple months, maybe at least 6 months. Now, if this wasn't Lord of the Rings themed, ooh, yeah, I think my personal score would be probably a 4 out of 10. I don't think it'd be a 3, I think it'd be a 4 out of 10, just because I don't find any of these mechanics to be that amazing, considering that this game is 1.5 to 2.5 hours. And to truly enjoy this game, I had to do some major unlearning of War of the Ring isms, because for a while I was very frustrated that I just couldn't conquer strongholds even though they were super undefended, since I wasn't drawing those darn swords, or how battle favors the free people so much in this game. That was odd. So I had to realize to have fun, I must 1. Pick at least one character that is actually interesting. Yeah, I think Gimli is really boring, although he's strong. And playing Frodo really feels like a burden of playing an NPC that just moves forward. 2. Be conscious of collecting resources and not being an aggressive warrior trying to take strongholds, because that's not how you win. 3. Actually keeping tabs on the shadow deck flips and routes, which I'm more than happy to delegate to Alexander. Number 4. Play with fun objectives, clear and simple. Anyways, yeah, I could have played War of the Ring in the time it took to play 2, maybe 2.5 games of this, and I would probably have a more fulfilling time with War of the Ring, more stories to tell, but my brain would be a lot more exhausted. And I'm not always down for that. For Fate of the Fellowship, I just kind of view it as, yeah, it's a lot easier to get going, and it's just a more chill way to hang out in Middle-earth. It's just less pressure. This doesn't even come close to hitting some of these highs, and it has these icky feeling lows where the mechanics do hit a bit of a hiccup, but this game doesn't really feel like Pandemic, so it's actually fun to me.
Personally led the army from Osgiliath to South Ithilien through into Minas Morgul. He killed everyone with Gandalf and Aragorn. They slaughtered the biggest shadow army in the world. And then they, using Lembas bread, they just kept going until they reached the crack of Mount Doom, and then he just threw it in. He was only a tiny little distressed, a teensy bit distressed from throwing the ring at Mount Doom. He was mostly like, it's fine.
It's fine.
We don't need Gollum, because Aragorn's here.
Right. Nice.
Actually, I can even re-roll this with Aragorn's power.
So we're at max hope.
We're at max hope.
And we didn't lose a single stronghold?
We almost did. We probably should have lost the Woodland Realm.
We just got really lucky.
Yes.
Yeah, we got insanely lucky this game. And it's fun.
That's how you win Fate of Fellowship. You just get really lucky. You just draw the most powerful cards.